About Japan declaring
Yeah.
war on floppy disks, or
This is actually pretty interesting. Japan declares war on floppy disks. Japan's digital minister Taro Kono has declared war on floppy disks and other retro tech used by the country's bureaucrats. Japan still has roughly 1,900 government procedures that require the use of disks, including floppy disks, CDs,
and this is the
and
best
mini
one.
disks.
Mini disc. What?
I was very surprised to see mini disks on here.
I know, right?
Kind of awesome. The U.S. government had been using floppy disks as recently as 2019 to receive nuclear launch orders from the president. That is awesome.
To be clear, I'm not suggesting, that it's on the internet. Like, I'm just saying we could do something a little more robust than floppy disk gets. That's okay. I just want to make that very clear.
Yeah. More than 20,000 typical disks would be needed to replicate an average memory stick storing 32 gigabytes of information. This is pretty epic. You guys did a video fairly recently building like a Windows 98 machine.
We bought it.
Oh, you bought one of those?
There's a vendor online that sells Windows 98 computers for like $1,000.
Yeah. And they have like new manufactured hardware and stuff.
No.
Oh, I thought they did.
No, they might have some, but a lot of it is refurbished.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because there's a lot of it out there and it costs nothing. But what costs is spending the time to validate it and make sure that it's all working and ready for deployment. Because there, as Anthony explained in the video, there are many industries that still rely on extremely old software.
Tons of manufacturing and stuff where like it does, as much as this might annoy some people in like software development and stuff, what they have does enough in a lot of these situations.
300 megahertz, that's millions of cycles a second. Like it's actually fine.
In a lot of very specific situations.
Running a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yep.
And the cost of updating that hardware that it's running is monumental. It could potentially be catastrophic depending on the size of the business. Like, so compared to, updating this giant kind of machine or whatever it is, just going out and buying another Windows 98 computer, even if you are being charged an obscene amount of money for it,
sure,
makes business sense.
It's an obscene amount of money for what you're getting, but it's still $1,000, which to individuals is going to seem like a lot. To a company that's churning out millions of dollars worth of product every day, and they need that freaking machine running, isn't going to be a huge expense.
It is amazing how different the calculations for the worthwhileness of a purchase are for a business compared to a consumer. See, I was even talking about, okay, what if you're a smaller business and you just can't afford to update the machinery? That's one way of thinking about it. But then Luke's like, well, what if they're churning out millions of dollars worth of equipment? Well, then they're clearly not starving for money. But let's talk about opportunity cost.
Yeah.
What if they had to turn off that machinery for some period of time in order to perform this maintenance to upgrade it so that it can run Windows Vista or so it can run Windows 10 or whatever the case may be? What is it costing them to have that not running? So it could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to turn it off and upgrade it versus what? I just spend $1,000 and I can go get a new Windows 98 computer? It's wild, right? And so as much as it feels counterintuitive for, as an 80s, 90s kid, right? I feel like Japan is like the land of technology.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the brand that Japan has to me, right? The first time that I ever saw a USB thumb drive, it was a friend bring it back, I believe, from a trip to Japan. Yeah, or the first time I saw a mini disc, it's Sony. Sony was like the premium, right? Samsung and LG were still like Lucky Gold Star, like cheap crap, right? Nobody respected those brands back then. Like Japan, the land of video games and technology. And like, so for me to read that the Japanese government is still using CDs, okay, fair enough, I guess. But mini disc was never even I wasn't even aware of it as a medium for anything other than, listening to MP3s off Napster, right? Like
Yeah, I don't know.
that was the only thing I ever knew it to exist for. And
It was also very
floppy
common
disks?
back then for I mean, it still is common, but not on the same scale, I would argue, because the internet has connected people very closely. But it was very common back then for certain technologies to actually take off in certain areas. So maybe mini disc was just used for other stuff in Japan
I
that
mean,
we're not used to.
it was sick.
It was cool.
Right? Like compared to the other things we had at the time, you got to understand USB thumb drives, not a thing yet. Okay. And even when they were a thing, they weren't necessarily convenient. Like if you went to a library or something like that, it's not like it would support you plugging in your USB drive. And I'm talking like the library at school. Like you would have to carry sometimes a floppy diskette with USB drivers on it. And then the USB drive that had your PowerPoint presentation or, some kind of multimedia thing that wouldn't fit on a floppy disk. Even once I had a USB drive, I would often still use floppy disks. Not in small part because my first USB thumb drive was either 8 megabytes or 16 megabytes. Like it actually didn't have that much more capacity.
People thought it was weird too. Jax in Floatplane Chat said mini disc was much more popular in Japan.
I mean, yeah, I guess I get it because the capacity compared to the things we had at the time was massive.
Apparently, you can copy rented music in Japan, and that was a big push for mini discs. Oh,
Oh, interesting. Okay. I mean, Japan has all kinds of stuff that I just like never even saw or never heard of before.
yeah.
Like the kinds of stuff you can get in vending machines over there and stuff. Unfortunately, the one time we went to Japan, we didn't really
We're
get a
there for
chance to stay.
very short period of time,
Yeah,
and
we
it
didn't get to
was
see much.
awesome for that really short period of time. But it was awesome. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's hilarious. I guess it's finally time for floppy disks to head out, ride out into the sunset. I shouldn't be that surprised. I mean, I remember feeling this exact same emotion. Like, you ever get that where it's like a deja vu kind of feeling, but you don't actually feel like this thing happened before, but you feel like you've experienced this feeling before. The day I found out that one of our major competitors at NCIX still submitted their POs via fax, I'm sitting here going, "What, you can't walk into the warehouse and grab a computer? You can't send a fucking email? Like, what do you mean? Why would you submit them via fax?
That one I genuinely
You
don't
would
understand.
actually send your rep an email to say, "Hey, check your fax machine."
Yeah.
It's like
That's
leaving
one
you
where
voicemail to ask if you've checked your text messages. Like, what are you doing?
yeah.
I can't fathom it.
It's very weird. It's very, very weird. It does
Facts.
make me a little bit sad, and I know this probably just like makes me old, but I always really liked the physical nature of things.
Sure.
Like there's an Animorphs book. Oof, that might be dating me as well. But there's an Animorphs book where they have these like data cubes.
Sure.
And like even Star Wars has the whatever they're called, the pyramid things that have knowledge in them.
Yep, for sure.
Um,
Holocrons.
yeah. These like physical mediums of information.
Just because I know that doesn't mean Star Wars isn't dead to me. Carry on.
I always thought they were really cool. I thought it was cool. That's one of the reasons why I like physical games as well.
Sure.
I've always really enjoyed physical media. And it is like better, sure, that things are becoming more digital and whatnot, but I do find it more boring. So I think it's like kind of cool in a not good way, I guess, maybe, that some of these things still run on this old hardware and run on these old systems and stuff like that. I think it's kind of neat.